We get a lot of emails from people asking us to review low-end vehicles. You know, the kind of thing that you can just pick up and buy and afford the monthly payments on.
And we also get a lot of emails from people who are interested in vehicles that are designed for a hard life, whether that be on the farm, just living in a remote area, or something that you can turn up to the building site with that isn't a massive V8 pickup truck. And we've spent some time on this channel begging, pleading, cajoling automakers to give us work truck variants and entry-level models. But, well, they don't, do they, Kate?
No, they give us things like this.
This is the Chevrolet Silverado EV RST. You can tell it's the RST because it's got the RST badge on the front. I was really eager to get behind the wheel of this truck, and I've actually also rented the work truck variant. Chevrolet wouldn't give us one, so last year when we were off in Southern California reviewing electric bicycles, we thought we might need a pickup truck to be able to put the bicycles in the back. So we actually put $300 into Hertz's pocket to borrow a work truck variant for about a day. I actually quite liked that truck. Although I said it was overpriced, it made sense in some ways. Does this? Should we find out?
Crazy times, can't you feel it? Is there a reason for it all? Huh, maybe. Take a ride on this pipe train. Hold it in. Wait for it. Here come the fall. Who's living is here? Who's living is there? This is a real revolution now. This is a real revolution now. Revolution, revolution.
It's been an interesting experience. I have driven, obviously, the work truck, as we said in the introduction, and I quite liked the work truck because it was designed for a very specific purpose. And that very specific purpose was being a mid-range, heavy-duty, rugged vehicle. Everything inside was designed to be wipe-downable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of work vehicles where you can take a hose to them and spray them out. And that's not quite there, but it's kind of there.
Right, and your rubber mats, vinyl covering, the rear seat area had a rigid cab back, so it didn't have any fancy drop-down rear liftgate, which is what this truck has, and I'd like to talk to you about that a bit later. But as a vehicle, I remember when I reviewed it, I was actually quite complimentary about it. It seemed to drive pretty well. It had sensibly sized wheels, 18-inch wheels, with equally sensibly sized tyres on them. Tyres that were built for rugged, long life, and the ability to absorb some of the, usual flotsam and jetsam that you have from owning and operating a work truck.
And your main criticism of it was the price.
Right, it was, I think, 50, 60, 70 grand, depending on which battery variant you purchased. But it had Apple CarPlay and it had Android Auto. And now we're in this truck, which is designed as a lifestyle vehicle in which you can't use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You have to use the baked-in system.
Which is Android. As far as I can tell, it's Android version 12 as well, so not even like the most current version of Android. And yeah, why it's not Android Auto, which is designed as a more automotive-friendly platform.
Right, and that it's everything from the sun visors. I mean, if you listen, it's got that.
But the sun's come around this.
Yeah,
I actually have to duck out the way completely on this one. And, you Yeah, that's a problem with a lot of car designs because of the raked screen.
Right.
But this one is fully like, I need to be over here, which not optimal.
I want to point out that the rattling that you're hearing right now is actually from our cups and the cup holders.
But the
not
rattling
from-
that you can't hear because it'll be taken out by the noise reduction is from the back and the front and this.
So there are things that about this that are improved on the Hummer. For example, the touch buttons down here are actually so much better
But they're also attached.
than what the Hummer had. The touchscreen display is okay. It's visible. It's much better than what we have in the Hummer. But as I mentioned earlier, we also have that silly icon carryover from the Hummer, which reminds you that someone somewhere thought that that was a good idea.
It takes its inspiration from like sporty versions of more prosaic vehicles, and you have the contrast trim here. It's contrast stitching, and you have the little red stitching on the steering wheel, and you've got your little RST with the RS in red, so you feel like it's, you know, it's ready to be sporty.
And you can, once you dig through the however many levels of menus to get to drive mode, you can actually press the button that looks like a transformer that had been described to AI and then redesigned. If you press that button,
It makes a stupid noise.
it makes a stupid noise, and then it gives you access to all of the power that this truck is capable of, which
I actually haven't tried. To be fair, I have not tried it. Mostly because it's been icy or snowy every day that I've had this vehicle. But also because when I floored it not in that mode, its directional stability was not supreme.
torque steering. Lots of it.
There was torque steering, there was issues with, like, it was a damp road, to be fair, but you could feel the traction control really working, and not entirely successfully. It took some concentration to keep us going forwards and not sideways.
While we're talking about acceleration and handling and power and all that, let's talk about how this truck actually feels, the road feedback. And I have thoughts on that because the wheels on this are obscene. 24 inches. We looked online before we had it to see what tyre options are available, and if you go with the stock rims, as far as I can tell, there's only 2 sets of tyre brands that are actually made that would fit, that would meet the weight requirements of this truck. And the cost, would you like to guess?
Well, it's going to be more than $1,000 because that's about what yours cost.
Yeah.
Let's say a nice even 2K.
About 2.5 grand for new regular tyres for this because of that 8,000 pound curb weight. The work truck variant with 18-inch wheels, they're narrower tyres, you can get a whole lot more choice because that's a fairly standard size for a semi-commercial pickup or other commercial vehicle that's used for work purposes. So there's choice, right?
Yeah.
You can buy plenty of different fleet tyre options that fit that rim. I don't know if it's because these tyres are so big, the wheels are so huge, but you feel very little feedback from the road. It's very vague.
Yeah, it's extremely vague. You don't, like, I mean, it's not vague in the sense of like wandery. It goes where you point it. It does, you know, track really well, but I have no idea what the road surface is.
But have you tried it in different steering modes? So you can adjust the steering feedback. You've got a very easy mode, which is I think what you've got it in right now.
Yeah, I've got it in whatever the default is.
Then you have a sport mode, and then there's another mode as well. I found in certain modes, this truck understeered abysmally. If you were pushing it through a twisty, you weren't going to push it through a twisty.
No, don't push it through a twisty. Don't try and push it through a twisty.
I also think it body rolls more than some of the other electric pickup trucks I've driven.
I mean, I haven't driven the F150 for quite a while, and you are the person who's driven the Rivian. They haven't yet lent us one. They keep talking about it, but they haven't yet. So I can't really comment on that. I will say, I mean, it has some body roll, and when you come to a stop, if you come to a stop fairly vigorously, which you're not going to do too often because the brakes give out if you try and do that. But if you do, then you get like a yawing motion as it goes forwards and back before it comes to a rest, which is definitely not optional.
And I don't know if that is because of the air suspension that this truck has. You can have height, adjustability with your height. Like the Hummer, you do have the equivalent of the extract mode, the super high mode, that allows you to deal with rougher terrain. Like the Hummer, it will hunker down on the freeway to try and make things more efficient, but obviously you're pushing a large amount of weight through the air. In terms of miles per kilowatt hour, I know that's something a lot of people talk about. The best I've seen from this is about 2.5. The worst I've seen is under 1.
Yeah.
And it really does depend on how you drive, the road conditions, how smooth you are, all of the usual stuff. But I feel that for most people, if you're driving this in an urban environment, which I am loath to admit most people would.
But that is where this is going to spend its time.
You're going to spend a lot of time charging. And you've got some experience of that.
Yeah, I mean, you drove it up to me when we hand over the vehicle. You drive it up. It's about nearly 200 miles once you factor in driving it to my workplace. And then I drove it home, which is, 200 and change. And then I put it in charge. And I have a 40 amp charger because, I only have my little Kia Niro.
Mm-hmm.
It charges like that relatively. This, by the middle of the next day, was still charging. And then I was making a trip up to Seattle. So I took it up to Seattle and back, which is 60 miles each way, 120 miles round trip. And then I put it on charge when I got back at like 1 in the morning. And the next day it was still charging at midday when I needed to go do errands. So I took the Soul because I was like, I need this actually charged to bring it back down to film.
I put it on my Ford 20 kilowatt charger because this does charge at up to 20 kilowatts AC if you have a compatible charger. And it only reached, I think, 85% full before I had to unplug it and drive it up to you. So you are going to spend a lot of time charging this at an AC charger, or you're going to spend a lot of time using DC fast chargers.
Well, I mean, you won't spend that much time because it's 300 kilowatts if you can get it on a 300 kilowatt charger, but you're going to spend a lot of money if you do it that way.
Right now, this truck doesn't appear to have crab mode enabled, but it's coming, I think, via an over-the-air software update. If you buy one now, I think you will have it. They call it the Sidewinder mode, which is the same as crab mode, right? It allows you to go sideways and do weird stuff with that.
Which is absolutely what you require for a building site.
But the way that this drives is more like a regular car than the F150. And I wonder if that is maybe why this feels so weird when it catches you off guard. The view out the front is like it might be for any large SUV. But then when you go around a corner, you're reminded, oh, I've got 8,000 pounds on board. This is quite a heavy vehicle. It feels heavy. It's a weird experience, and I wish I could put it into words, but the feeling looking forwards makes me feel like I'm driving a smaller vehicle, but then the dynamics remind me I'm driving a bigger one. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it.
Getting hold of a work truck variant of the Silverado EV is difficult. Getting hold of the F150 Lightning Pro, which is the work truck version of the F150 Lightning, is difficult. And as the vehicle has aged, which models you can buy has actually been reduced if you are what they call a retail customer, like you're a regular person wanting to buy it. And you can only buy certain things if you have a fleet. So Ford, for example, and I believe this is a really ridiculous, pointless move on Ford's part, Ford has stopped selling F150 Lightnings to retail customers with 20 kilowatt onboard charging. You can only buy a 10 kilowatt onboard charger variant now. If you are a fleet customer, you can buy your truck with 20 kilowatts onboard charging.
Which is very frustrating for people who have small fleets, as we've encountered with our consultancy side,
Right.
where people who have small fleets cannot get the work truck variant, despite the fact they want it, and have to go for a higher trim variant that is in some ways less capable.
Right, I mean, I would have bought the F150 Lightning Pro with the extended range battery pack and vehicle to grid capability had it been available.
Yeah.
We didn't buy the XLT with the extended range battery pack because the price difference between that and the Lariat was so small, and the Lariat added so much extra features that for me, the Lariat made sense. And we use it as a work truck because the F-150 Lightning, for the most part, is the same as the regular truck in terms of what fits where.
Yeah.
And you can add any number of different attachments. I don't think that's true for this truck.
No, well, it doesn't have that kind of back catalogue of bits that you can just buy off the shelf from multiple different companies.
And while we're talking about that, if you have an F-150 Lightning, you can just go out and buy a new bed and whack it in.
Yeah.
You can't do that with this, as far as I'm aware.
That is my understanding.
And there's a whole lot of extra tech in this vehicle that's going to increase the cost of ownership. The suspension is air suspension. It is going to be more expensive to repair than just a standard mechanical suspension. It's got the four-wheel steering, which is more complicated. And the work truck doesn't have that. The work truck has standard suspension and standard steering.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense, because if you're a fleet customer who's actually using this as a working vehicle, then you want things that, if they get damaged, you can replace really cheaply.
And a lot of these big fleet operators have their own mechanics who
Yeah.
take care of, maintaining the fleet. I'm sorry, I just lifted off the throttle there, and the single pedal driving is set to
High.
very high. So in order to change that, we have to go in here and we have to do the drive modes. And then we have to go to, we can also do it up here if it's set up to do that. But it's a nightmare, isn't it, to find it. So go to drive modes, and we have to go to my mode, I think. And there we go. It's now different. Single pedal driving is different. There's the single pedal
So
driving.
now it's off.
Now it's off. Now it's on, and you can set the level here, normal, high, and off, and you can set it to show on the home screen. But it's not easy to find, right?
No, it's a multi-button.
And then this is the
Sensory
ridiculous.
journey.
This is the ridiculous transformer that I was telling you about earlier, right? Here we go, and it gives you that fake engine noise as well. That is so vague. Wasn't that vague?
It's horrible. That's the thing, is it has this capability to deliver hundreds of kilowatts, and it doesn't really have the ability to get it to the road in a way that lets you go in the direction you want.
It does feel like when you floor it, the truck is fighting you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do that in the F-150 Lightning, and I'm sorry I keep talking about it, but it feels like those two cross-shot really well. When you do that in the F-150 Lightning, it lays it down.
Yeah.
It punches you in the gut and you go forwards in a straight line. And I don't know if that's because it's got mechanical suspension, whether that's because it's got, traditional steering geometry or something else.
Yeah.
But it handles it. This just feels like, ooh. I must admit, though, that one of the things that is pretty good about this is that when you're on the freeway, it does a pretty passable job of doing driver assistance.
It does. Its level 2 and a bit driver assistance package is mostly very good, but it has, as is traditional with these driver assistance packages, had several goes at killing me. So it on more than one occasion attempted to drive through a car on an automatic lane change.
Yep.
Which involved me going, no, you're not going to do that. And it also has an occasional tendency to not notice the car in front, accelerate hard towards it, and then suddenly at the last second go, oh, there's a car in front of us. We need to slow down.
Yeah.
Which it did that several times to some poor driver in a pickup, where it would be cruising for a bit and then it would suddenly go, oh, I can accelerate. And I was like, no.
We haven't really talked about the cabin experience, other than that really annoying rattle behind us.
Yeah, the big rattle from the opening panel.
Let's talk about that. So one of the big features of this vehicle is that it can drop down the rear of the cab and gives you access to putting long things in the bed of the truck. The rear seats, the seat cushions fold forwards, and then there are buttons on the headrests that allow you to fold those down, and then they fold down, and then you can access the rear of the vehicle. Now there are two options here. One is basically keep the glass in place, and there are two little doors like your old-fashioned ski doors on an old sedan from Europe, right?
Yeah.
That allow you to pass through longer items that might not be the full width of the bed. That's really easy to set up and not too much of a faff. But if you want to actually drop the entirety of the rear of the cab, you have to remove the glass, which is a fully manual thing. I worry that glass, if you remove it and put it back in enough, you'll eventually get to a point where the rear heated windscreen doesn't, or the rear window, the heated rear window doesn't actually defrost properly. So you remove that, there's a pocket on the actual rear panel that you can slide the glass into, and then you press the same two buttons you press to flip down the little hatches, and if the window is not there, it pops two different actuators and the whole rear of the cab drops away. What are you going to be carrying in the back that's really, really long? Well, let's talk about that. So the first option would be something like sheet goods, like wood.
Yeah.
If you were carrying drywall,
Yeah.
you could theoretically put your drywall in and keep the bed up, the tailgate up. You could do that with a canoe if you wanted to put a canoe in here.
Yeah.
Of course, because this is a fully glass roof, you don't really have options when it comes to roof bars.
No.
And so, yeah, you could put your canoe in there. But do you really want to put a wet, mucky canoe inside your cab?
Well, no, I wouldn't. Well, I would if it was a cab that I could spray down, but it's not. So
That's my point, right?
yeah. I mean, it's weird. It is this weird situation where the feature that you would maybe want on the actual work truck variant is not available on the work truck variant, but it is on this one because this is the fancy expensive variant, but then you're not going to want to actually use it. And because of the nature of it, it compromises this vehicle because it rattles.
And eventually those seals are going to need to be replaced. So the more fancy features you add, the more likely it is this vehicle will be problematic down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some other truck features that are missing. So you don't have adjustable pedals, which is a fairly standard higher end truck feature. The seats are not particularly wide.
They aren't. I mean, they're fine for me. I find
They're
them
fine for
reasonably
me,
comfortable.
but they're not the most comfortable.
But I'm going to say if you're much bigger than me,
Yeah.
you're gonna, or than us, you're gonna start finding them a bit narrow. And there's
This-
actually not that much shoulder room.
This doesn't have a lockable
No, it just
compartment. It just sits there.
It just sits.
And
it's
then-
just stiff from plastic friction.
And then this here does move. It's got a little adjustment that you can press and move it forwards, and then you've got that boat floor underneath.
And just like following up with this feeling a bit cheap, there's molding defects in the plastic on the front. It's like wavy plastic. And the trim here, this contrast stitching, gonna do contrast stitching, you got to do it right.
Right. So, you've got all of these niggles, right? The truck has got a really long range. It's got heated and cooled seats. It's reasonably pleasant inside. It's not a vehicle I would want to road trip in. I would worry about its long-term life. It doesn't feel particularly durable. That's the word I've been trying to find all day. And because of that lack of durability, I think this is a vehicle that's going to be purchased by someone who's going to swap it out regularly. It's not designed for someone who wants to buy a vehicle and keep it for a long period of time.
No, you buy it for your 3 years and then ship it on to someone else to deal with the problems.
The onboard power capability of this is less than the F150 Lightning. So you do get power takeoff on this, but you have fewer outlets, fewer overall power capacity. And eventually, yeah, you can do like a vehicle to home setup with this. GM's actually now just started selling that. I don't really have any reports to share about how effective that is. I mean, it doesn't have to be very good to be better than Ford's system. So
This has to actually work.
I'm going to give GM a tick on that. Hopefully, it's better than the Ford system, which, as I said, doesn't have to be particularly good to beat that. But you know, there are some other stuff. The head-up display is nice. I like the head-up display. I think it's informative. It's clear. I can see it very easily. I haven't really tried it with shades because it's been snowing and wet all week. But it doesn't feel like a $90,000 pickup truck.
What, this plastic trim here?
It doesn't waft.
It doesn't waft.
I want more waft for my dollar.
I just want it not to creak and rattle at 3,000 miles.
What I really want is for GM, and we mentioned this in the Ford video, we asked Ford to bring back the Ford Ranger single cab pickup with a decent battery pack. Bring back the S10 pickup, small, 2-wheel drive, lower to the ground, capable of carrying a decent amount of gardening supplies or straw or whatever.
So good.
Make it smaller, make it fit into a normal parking space, and then we'll be happy.
Yeah.
So this is a first. This is my truck, Automakers. It's with us today because we were filming, we needed a vehicle for our camera person, and it's been hauling all the camera gear in, and that's obviously the truck that we've been reviewing. But putting these two side by side, we would be very delusional if we pretended that either of these vehicles were actually work vehicles.
Oh yeah, no, neither of these. I mean, yours, as you said, you've made a pretty solid argument for it can be used as a work vehicle. I disagree that it is one. I agree that you use it as one, but I disagree that it is
I agree
one.
with your disagreement.
Yeah,
But
this is fundamentally a lifestyle vehicle that you buy because you want a toy to take to the beach.
right, and along with all the gadgets and the bells and the whistles that this vehicle has that this one does not, you're adding a lot of post-purchase hurt down the road. Legitimately, does a pickup truck need air suspension?
I would say not. I mean, no.
I mean, there are people lifting F150s just using lift kits that are not air suspension.
Yeah.
And they've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
The same is true of other pickup trucks. If you absolutely need extra ground clearance, and there are people out there who legitimately need that extra ground clearance.
I know people who live in the middle of nowhere down what is fundamentally a logging track and they need ground clearance.
Yeah, and that would be a vehicle that you wouldn't buy if you had, this wouldn't be the vehicle that you buy, or really this, if you were in that situation. Now, I do know people who live off-grid who have an F150 Lightning. Ironically, they all own the Pro variants, which kind of proves our point, right? But they own the Pro variants because it's more affordable and you can hose it down and you can do all of that stuff, and they don't need long distance travel and all of that. I own this because it was the only variant that I could buy that was extended range, that had a cost point that allowed me to have home backup even though it doesn't work as it should, and I can tow 10,000 pounds, blah, blah, blah. Interestingly, this claims a slightly higher capacity for towing.
12,500?
Right. But it lacks a 4-pin electrical connector at the back for a standard trailer, which is what most people would be putting on a performance-oriented truck like this. They wouldn't be towing 12,000 pounds with it, and if you did want to tow 12,000 pounds with a Silverado EV, you would probably buy the LT variant, which is somewhere between this and the work truck.
Yeah.
And if you want the performance of a Hummer EV, which is ludicrous and over the top, this is maybe an option for you. I could see if you wanted the acceleration, if you are a performance enthusiast, this is probably a better pickup truck for you than this.
And I think also, if you live in a city and you're going to buy a pickup truck, please don't. But if you live in a city and you're going to buy a pickup truck as your lifestyle vehicle, this has much tighter steering. Like, you can get into spaces with this because it has four-wheel steering. And yes, in the long term, that is probably going to cost you when something goes wrong.
Well, we talked about tyres, right? 24-inch tyres.
Yeah.
Which make these look tiny.
Yeah.
We actually worked out the other day, we had both of these vehicles parked side by side. The tyres on that truck come up to about here. On this truck. And this truck has got massive tyres.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know how big the brakes are on that?
Not big enough.
17 inches.
They're still not big enough.
That's bigger than the wheels on your Morris Minor.
I know. It's still not big enough because the thing doesn't actually stop very well.
I mean, it has one pedal driving, which is very effective.
Yes.
It has the paddle Regen on demand, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm a fan of that system in every Chevy vehicle, and I think it's one of the best decisions they made. I also want to talk about some of the weird design decisions that were made with this truck. It has a front trunk. There is a very hidden button right at the front. I didn't think it had a button until I was shown it, but there's a button there. You can press it once, it will go up. You press it again and it will come down. Fine. But if you want to use the remote to close the hood, you have to hold your finger on the remote or it will just stop. Same for the button inside the truck, which seems very weird.
That is very strange.
It's like a user design choice that doesn't make sense. The rear tailgate, there's a button to release just the center section where the step is, because it's that multi-function tailgate that GM is so fond of. You can press it once and it will flip that bit down, or you can press a different button and it will flip the whole thing down. But then there's no electronic backup.
No, there isn't. You have to shove it. Which
on a truck that's $15,000 more expensive than this is a bit of a weird decision. It's again, it harkens back to that, let's put tons of cool features in, but then let's remove the quality of life stuff to save money.
Or to make more money, and I know we've already ranted about this a little bit, but no Android Auto, no CarPlay.
Yeah.
Like it has Android. It seems to have Android, not Android Auto.
Right.
Which is a weird decision in and of itself for licensing purposes, I'm sure.
And if you buy the work truck, which GM won't sell you unless you're a fleet customer, the fleet version has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay in it.
Well, you know why that is though, don't you?
Why?
Because the fleet customers will need their apps.
Right.
They'll have their custom app for, I need to get to this destination, or I need to deliver here.
Yeah.
They don't care about you having that because you're not a fleet customer.
And they can sell your data, and well, no, they're not allowed to anymore. There was a court decision, they're not allowed to sell your data anymore. But I mean, this is a car that is software driven, and if you want a subscription, great. But if you don't, you're going to lose a lot of functionality.
Yeah.
It feels like someone took this truck and went, okay, we've got this really fantastic, expensive drivetrain and battery pack, massive as it is. We've decided that in order for Americans to really engage with EVs, it needs to have a 400-mile range. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. There is a market for it, as much as we would argue.
I understand that there is a market for it. I think it is an education thing, but I don't think that we're getting there with educating people.
But the same criticisms I have of this are what I had of the Bolt EUV, the second generation, as we'll call it, and other vehicles that follow on after the first. So the Bolt was a cracking vehicle. They didn't try and skimp and save on the interior. They knocked out a few features that I would rather it had, but it was drivable and it was livable. And then as they tried to make it cheaper and they decontented it, it became less so. I know Ford's doing the same with this, by the way. I'm not giving Ford an easy pass. Ford has removed half of the features, it feels like. I'm exaggerating. But Ford has removed a lot of the convenience features that came with trucks like this when they first launched. This as a 23 model year doesn't have many features that my 22 had. And now if you go to a 25 model year, it's still missing a bunch of features compared to this. And when they built this, it feels like they put in this massive battery pack, powerful motors, and then went, how can we scrimp and save elsewhere? The sun visors feel flimsy.
Yeah.
The interior, the seats are not very comfortable.
I mean, I don't find them hideously uncomfortable, but they're fine. Like everything in this vehicle is fine.
The stitching, the contrast
God.
stitching.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I saw it, I was like, if you're gonna do contrast stitching, it has to be on point.
Yeah.
It looks like they were just not really paying attention as they went along.
And there are gaps in the front panel. We rag on the company that shall not be named for poor quality control, for panel gaps. This also has poor quality control and panel gaps. This, as far as I can tell, is not a pre-production. It is a production vehicle. Sometimes we do get pre-production vehicles.
Yeah, but they're normally covered in stickers that say, this is pre-production.
There are gaps that make no sense.
Yeah.
There are rattles that make no sense.
Yeah.
And when you add in all the extra features, the air suspension, the crab steering, that's going to be very costly to replace. It's going to be very costly if you get into an accident, if you run over something, you damage any of those components. We've talked about this before. We're not just giving Chevy a hard time here. We're being, do you really need four-wheel steering?
Yeah.
The answer is, if you were using it as a pickup truck, you wouldn't need it to have four-wheel steering. It's only because you want to buy it and live in, you know, downtown Portland or downtown San Francisco that you start to need that four-wheel steering.
Yeah.
If you treat it as a pickup truck and you live out in the boonies, you've got space. Same for the air suspension, right? That rear drop-down mid tailgate, they call it. It was the fancy feature of this pickup truck. Now the work truck doesn't have it, and in my opinion is a better vehicle because of it. You have to pop out the glass. There's a special slot that the glass fits into. You then have to press 2 buttons to flop down the rear end. And there's rubber seals all the way around that are ultimately going to perish and start leaking. And I know that that has been a problem with other Chevy pickup trucks over the years that have utilized that same design. There are, I think, multiple electronic actuators that have to fire. It's not manual, it's electronic. It makes the whole back end of that truck feel a little loose fitting and a little noisy. And you've commented about the rattles and road noise. And
yeah, I mean, that is the first thing that struck me driving it, is that it rattles. And I was like, well, how many miles has it got on it? Oh, 3,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but my car has 60,000 and the only rattle is the door speaker, because I listen to music kind of loud. And that's it. Like 60,000 miles, no rattles. 3,000 rattles from the back, rattles from the front somewhere, rattles from creaks from the dashboard. It's not.
There is some good stuff though about this truck.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the fact that it doesn't have a certain logo on the front. It's a truck that actually handles pretty decently on the freeway. It's level 2.5 autonomous driver assistance feature, the Supercruise.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, I mean,
There's been a couple of occasions where it decided that the car in front was going too slowly and it tried to pull out while there was somebody right off my quarter panel, not quite in my blind spot.
Yes, it did that to me a couple of times.
And that,
it's like, I'm going to pull into this lane. You're like, no,
you're
you are not.
The audio system is meh.
Yeah, it's kind of mediocre.
And it just feels like, honestly, it just feels like it's a vehicle that's priced because of the battery pack and the drivetrain and nothing else.
That's the thing. They spent their money on the battery pack and the drivetrain.
And they tried to save everywhere else.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want when you spend $95,000 on a pickup truck.
But it does give you 400-ish miles of range.
It does.
And 300 kilowatt charging.
I get behind the wheel of this and I'm reminded every time this is an expensive truck, I need to look after it. This feels like, if I'd have bought that, I might...
It feels like a mid-range pickup truck.
It does.
It does.
If you are in the market for an electric lifestyle pickup truck, this is not the vehicle I would recommend. Every day I would recommend the Rivian. The Rivian has more maneuverability, better software stack, over-the-air updates. Yes, you have to deal with, you know, a startup service problems, which I know many Rivian owners have. But the electric vehicle drivetrain tech in the Rivian is superior to this. It's lighter, it's more nimble, it can actively go off-road, it doesn't have ridiculously massive wheels. That would be a better choice. And if you want a work truck, buy the work truck variant if you are a fleet customer.
Yep.
If the Rivian is too small and you want a vehicle that is capable of work but also has, you know, user adaptability, aftermarket parts, if that's important to you, you're going to go with this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want this Ford ubiquity, you want to put whatever racks and doodads on it, this would be the truck. If I was going to go around the world in an electric pickup truck, it would be this. If I was going to try and pick up people, it would maybe be this. If I wanted to have a daily driver that was capable of rugged stuff, had the lifestyle stuff, it would be the Rivian. And if I wanted to join the SS, well, there's only one choice.
Thanks for joining us today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room on our Patreon page in the down below, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube, helping cover our bills, paying our team, and ensuring that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. We've got options available across a wide range of different price points, starting from just $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Dana Pearson, Bruce C95, Kaluk, Chip Chandler, Dave Nelson, Nathan Sievers, Boris Reingold, and Callie Electro Dad. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member today for your moment of fame, and you can even gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll also find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at for the time being, address listed below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you are someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so we get the commission, not Jeff Bezos. So we can continue focus on making our content even better and reducing burnout, we're being a little freer with our release days, but we plan on releasing new content every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday on our main channel, plus something on Sunday over on Transport Evolved Take 2. And if you want more, the algorithm that currently hates us thinks you should watch this video, but we think this one is one we think you should watch as well. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving.